Welcome to our third discipler group. We're glad that you've come back to join us again. If you remember, in the first two sessions, we've been talking about vision. In our first session, we talked about vision stretches us. There's the reality of where we are now and where God is calling us into the future. We used a rubber band to describe that tension that's created when we're moving into the future with God's vision and how that really begins to stretch us. In our second session, we talked about being able to see, that vision is about sight. And if you remember, we had to look deeply into a picture to see the full dimensions of that picture. Also, we learned in that second session that vision is like a field. It's like something that you move into, a vision field, that you're surrounded by the vision. You know how that is. You've walked into a church, you've seen a vital congregation, you experience a vital congregation, and you just feel the presence of God. You feel the vision of God all around you. Those are the kind of things that we want to see happening in our churches, that we're stretching to where God is calling us, and that we're creating vision fields that people can see and experience God's vision for themselves. Today, I've invited some guests to be with us to help us learn more about surrendering to the vision. As I mentioned to you earlier, I was going to have some guests with me today, and I have two persons from Acts 2 congregations. Both of their congregations are receiving new people, new believers into their churches. They're also growing in worship. They're engaged in mission and ministry in their community and also around the world, and we're seeing exciting signs and wonders happening in their congregations. With me today is Reverend Joe Daniels from the Emory Church, who has been the pastor there and has been leading that congregation in some very dynamic ways. Also with me today is Barbara Cambridge. Barbara is a member of Foundry Church. She's also the lay leader at Foundry Church. And in her professional life, she is a program officer for the National Council of Teachers of English. Share with me, Barbara and Joe, who do you know that has consistently surrendered to a vision?
What comes to mind, Bishop, is not actually individuals, but a congregation. Foundry United Methodist Church back in 1994 set as its purpose to be an open, inclusive community for Jesus Christ. That has been a vision that Foundry has continued to try to act out in every way possible, whether we're talking about the sign at the front of the church that says, "Welcome everyone," to working with day laborers at 15th and P, to including our youth in worship services, to singing our hymns in various languages. Our attempts to be inclusive are very important to us, and it's part of our vision for our church.
Two people who really inspire me as being people who surrendered to a vision are Moses in the biblical tradition, as well as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. from the Civil Rights Movement. I'm particularly inspired by the fact that both men surrendered their all to make sure that there was a major change in history with the vision that God placed on their lives. It was a very inspiring story of each of them that required great sacrifice, not just of themselves, but of their families, of the very people they represented in order to make that vision happen. Without sacrifice, a vision just does not come to reality.
Share with me what you find to be one of the trickiest parts of living into a vision.
Well, Bishop, I have found, and I'm sure many pastors find, that the trickiest part of living into a vision is really the obstacles that come at you when you get close to that vision. I know it seems to me like the closer I get to the vision, the greater the challenges become, both personally, professionally, within the congregation. It feels oftentimes like a boulder rolling down a hill once you get close to the vision. There are leadership changes and leadership development issues that come at you. There are physical plant issues. I know at Emory Church, we're in the midst of a lifestyle stewardship campaign, and our boiler went out in the wintertime, and we're now investing in a new boiler. Also just the landscape and the environment and the atmosphere of the community in which we work. There are always changes that are taking place, and the ability to make the changes necessary to get to the vision without letting the obstacles get in your way is something that is very important for us to get to where we want to go.
Another tricky thing is honoring the past while we're preparing for the future. Many of us have practices in our churches that have served us well in the past and have in fact enacted the vision under certain material conditions and times. But as times change and as new people come to the church, as we have different societal conditions, we may need to operate in a different way. But we need to honor those past practices for those people for whom that's been very important as we transition into the new practices that will serve people in God's world today.
Joe and Barbara, tell me about some of the ways that you help a congregation or a group of people surrender to a vision.
One way to live out the vision is to be sure to communicate. Communication is so important in a congregation as large as Foundry, and in any congregation for that matter. We need to communicate across groups, across worship services, and across decision making before, during, and after important decisions in a congregation. In the past year, Foundry has had to make some of those important decisions, and we started a practice that's worked well for us. Modeled after a book, it's called Holy Conversations, and we have had open forums for people to express their ideas, their reservations, their hopes for the future. These open conversations have been very important. They need boundaries, of course, and our boundaries have included being respectful of the points of view of all people that are part of the conversation.
There are three things that have been very helpful to me with regards to helping people surrender to the vision and to live out that vision. First of all, as pastors, we've got to preach the vision. We have an audience, a wide variety of people who we preach to every Sunday. And this is a major, major opportunity for us to cast the vision before people from Sunday after Sunday after Sunday. Regardless of the biblical text, there's always something in a sermon that can attract people to the vision that God has given us. Second thing I like to do, and that we do at Emory Church, is to help people to get involved in leadership development opportunities, particularly leadership development around the vision, to help people embrace the vision as a leader, to learn how as a leader I can become more involved in the vision and attract people to become more involved in that vision with me. Thirdly, I've been particularly inspired by Tom Rainer's book, Breakout Churches. In there, Tom has a section on dealing with vision, and he talks about how we do not discover vision, but vision discovers us. And he uses three models. He uses the leader's passion, the congregation's passion, and the community's need. And where those three areas intersect, oftentimes we find God speaking to us, God speaking God's visions to us. I teach that to our folks, and I try to help people to focus on that so that we can really talk about, share, and really, really concentrate on what it is God wants us to accomplish.
Barbara and Joe, I want to thank you for coming in today and sharing with me and all of those who will be watching about vision and just how vision is so critical, and particularly how surrendering to a vision is critical for helping a ministry to move forward. As Barbara and Joe have shared with us, having a vision also brings some challenges. Barbara talked about how important it is to have good process and be working with the people as you move into the future. Joe reiterated how important it was to continue to surrender to that vision, to make sure that everything is in alignment. All that we're doing is really around the vision and really driving that vision home. I want to talk about that a little further. One of the things that we have a hard time doing is surrendering to anything. But let's think about Jesus. And in 2 Philippians, it talks about Jesus surrendering to God. Although he could have claimed to be equal with God, he surrendered himself, humbling himself, taking the form of a servant. It's that kind of surrender that we're talking about here, surrendering to what God has for us. Many people will ask, I understand vision and being able to let people run with the vision, but how is it that we hold the church together if many people are running in different directions? As one person said, many visions makes for division. We don't want division in our churches. We want unity and harmony and everybody moving toward one vision. So how do we get to that one vision? Well, the first thing is to make sure we understand what's core to our congregation, to our church. What is it that's really core? The core is our vision, our mission, our beliefs, and our values. That creates a playing field in which then people can move and operate and work together. Now, some people say, well, that feels like a box. It puts me in a box. But those boundaries are really healthy. It's what holds everybody together. But if we only think of it as a flat plane, a box that we have to stay in, then we're missing the whole concept. Just like that magic eye experience that we had the last time we met and we saw deeply within, or creating vision fields, well, what I want you to begin to think about is that that box is the place that we grow out of, that we move upward, and that's the vision that begins to soar. As we think about vision, what is very critical is that you begin to discover what God's vision is for your church, what God is asking your church, what God is asking you as a congregation to begin to soar toward. Each of us need to begin to understand how God is stretching us, how God wants us to see, have hindsight, insight, and foresight, and how God wants us to begin to surrender to the things God is calling us to become. Think about it as though you're flying a kite. You're within that box. That's your core. Become more like Christ. It holds everything, our vision, mission, beliefs, and values. And we want to become like Acts 2 congregations and beginning to soar. Well, that kite begins to soar as long as there's someone standing on the ground and that they're working out of that particular framework or the core. So the playing field, the boundaries, really secure us to something that allows the kite to soar and to move outward. Those vision, mission, beliefs, and values is what holds everyone together. Then we can give people the opportunity to really soar with the vision as long as they're anchored in that vision, mission, beliefs, and values. So when people ask, how is it that we can give permission for people to create their own ministries? We can give them permission as long as they understand the vision, the mission, the beliefs, and the values. And then out of that, they begin to work and allow God to move them in the directions God is calling them to go. But they always come back to that playing field, to that backyard, which is our vision, mission, beliefs, and values. As we surrender to that vision, mission, beliefs, and values, then we can begin to soar as congregations.